Change the law. Well, the discredited Rolling Stone campus rape article, is now back in the headlines. A judge ordering the central figure in that piece, identified only by the name Jackie, to give a sworn deposition tomorrow as part of a defamation case filed by an administrator at the University of Virginia. Joining me now, trial attorney Eric Richman and criminal defense attorney Bob Bianchi. He's a former head county prosecutor in New Jersey and a trial attorney as well. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks.
Eric, let's start with you. What does a plaintiff have to prove in this case?
Sure. Basically, the plaintiff in this case has to prove that there was some kind of negligent act on behalf of Rolling Stone. That act of fact-checking is exactly what it sounds like.
It's basic.
It's pretty straightforward. The definition is in the word. You just have to peel away one layer of what this alleged victim, who might not have been a victim in this case, is saying. Go to another source. Try to find out if what she's saying is true. Did they ever speak to this actual administrator who's suing now, or anybody else involved in her story? And it's that negligence standard. If they actually fact-checked, if they used a reasonable standard to look into what she was saying, that's how they're going to be held accountable.
So it sounds like they may have a pretty strong case, Bob.
I don't think they have a strong case at all.
Why
because
not?
There's a difference between a private individual and a public figure. She will be considered as a school administrator as a public figure, so there you have to...
Wait, a school administrator is a public figure?
Yes, absolutely. Under
okay, I can see that somebody on TV is a public figure, but this is just a regular person representing the university.
There's different levels of public figures, but if she had policy-making decisions, which she did, then you have to actually show actual malice, which means that the publisher knew that it was false, or it was a reckless disregard for false. So I agree with Eric.
But shouldn't they have known it was false by going through Journalism 101?
Yeah, that's the difference between a journalistic question and poor journalism versus being able to prove a defamation lawsuit against a quasi-public figure. You have to actually show at the time that it was published that the person had actual malice or knew it was false or a reckless disregard for false. It's very difficult.
I have to respectfully disagree with you, Bob. I don't think that an administrator to school, she's actually an associate administrator, associate dean, will qualify as a public person. And that's an important factual question here, because it is a different standard. That's the correct standard for a public person or someone on TV, as opposed to a private person. And I don't think that there's a lot of gray area. It's going to be one or the other, a factual determination. And if it's a private person, it's that lesser standard. So that's all that this administrator has to prove. Negligence.
And I'll tell you why I disagree with that, because there's been case law that actually said, and I think it's the Butts case, Gates versus Butts in particular, that says that school administrators put themselves out as quasi-public figures. So I agree with Eric. It'll be a question, but if she's considered a public figure,
all right, I want to see the outcome of that one.
I want to see the case.
Another important case to tell you about, and this affects another university. We're talking about Baylor University, the country's largest Baptist school, claiming that it ignored rape allegations against a former football player. That lawsuit against Baylor in Waco, Texas, the former Baylor student says that a football player raped her at an off-campus party back in 2012, and the school was, quote, deliberately indifferent to her complaints and complaints by other women about that same player. The former football player, Tevin Elliott, was convicted of assaulting the plaintiff and is now serving 20 years in prison. The university, Eric, had received 6 separate complaints about this guy.
Right, exactly. And you said the standard. That's the Title IX standard. If a school is receiving federal funds, they got to play by the federal rules. So it's pretty straightforward.
And the federal rules are what?
Basically that they have to make sure that there's no gender discrimination based upon these complaints. So if a woman, or in this case several women, come forward about this kind of activity, they have to do 2 things. First of all, they have to have a system in place that prevents this kind of activity, that prevents these kinds of assaults. That includes...
You can't police parties.
No, you can't, but you can educate people when they come to school about what consent is, about living together with the opposite sex for the first time. You can have counselors for those victims or alleged victims, and you can teach people. Also, you can have all kinds of due process for people that are accused of those crimes.
Let's talk about that due process. And Bob, you've been involved with some of these types of cases before, and oftentimes a young woman, assuming it happens to a woman, she'll go to campus security, right? They conduct an investigation, but what about the local police? If it's just been handled by campus security, a lot could fall through the cracks.
Yeah, listen, I had this problem when I was the county prosecutor, and I had many colleges in my jurisdiction. A lot of times they wanted to keep this internal. I agree with the standard that Eric is saying here right now. They didn't report it to police. Police are the primary persons to report it to. There can be parallel investigations, but in this particular case, you have to remember that this girl, they had no coordinator for the Title IX, number 1, which is bad. They had no trainings, no policies, and they knew of 6 other alleged incidents with this person. They wouldn't give her a restraining order, and they should have been working, and they said, well, we can write a letter, but we can only hope that he follows it.
Oh,
they kept him on campus, and they never even got a coordinator under Title IX for over 2 years.
And now he's
They did it
serving
afterwards.
20 years before that he was convicted.
And so we know that that's a solid case, and there were 6 individuals. And my experience has been, in order not to let it seem like that the school's unsafe or whatever, a lot of times things don't get reported to law enforcement until way after they're supposed to.
My goodness, guys, we have to wrap it up. But for parents out there of young women who are attending schools, they should know they go to the local police and then report it.
Always go to the
campus
police
security
first, absolutely.
And insist on that. Because the
Absolutely.
school might try to discourage you from doing that,
I
right?
think so, absolutely, because
right.
they have their own interests.
Wow. Eric and Bob, thanks a lot. Some really important advice for folks out there. Eric, let's
Yeah,
start with
that's
you.
great advice.
Yeah, thanks.